Welcome back, everyone, to the 7th episode of the BE Chamber podcast. Super excited to be back. Super excited to have a new guest with us at the BE Chamber podcast. And I'm also looking forward to our discussions for today's session. But at the same time, I just hope that everyone is doing well. I hope that everyone is still making progress on your transformation journey, considering that we are now at the last month of the year of 2024. So we're looking forward to ending of the year very strongly, ending of the year very positively, and then starting the new year with a big bang and making sure that we can get back into things all about transformation. So I'm here with one of my colleagues at the BE Chamber. Etienne, welcome. Good to have you here. Are you doing well?
Very well, thank you. Yourself?
Great stuff. It's always good to chat to you, Etienne. I know you've got quite a vast experience in terms of BE transformation, your journey with the BE Chamber. Maybe to start off, tell us a bit about yourself, your journey at the Chamber, how has it been, your challenges, your experience. Share a bit about yourself.
Sure, fantastic. Thanks, Neil. So I started at the BE Chamber back then was called Visa Group in 2012. So going through that journey, joined as a consultant. So I used to help companies with the management of the scorecards, going through that type of process. Through that process, I learned a lot. There was a huge, vast growth in terms of my knowledge and expertise over the first 2 years. Around 2014, I joined in the business development space, so in the sales aspect, and that's really where I went on my expansion in terms of understanding the actual challenges that companies have and looking for solutions in order to support those companies. It has been a very diverse environment, both in the business and with our clients, and overall it has been a fantastic journey itself.
No, awesome. I think that you mentioned something quite significant, which is the word challenges.
Yeah.
Now we know within our industry there's multiple challenges for companies to comply, to find solutions, to make sure that they're implementing sustainable initiatives. What's one of the biggest challenges that you've picked up when it comes to discussions or with companies, with clients, with members, that speaks to them achieving their transformation goals? What's one of the biggest challenges?
I think there's a few things. One of the biggest challenges is the disconnect between BE and transformation managers and leadership. And I think that the disconnect is quite right. So you have individuals who are passionate about the subject, that know the subject, that want to create change, that want to have impact outside, but also want to secure the points. Then you have leadership, and it depends on every company. Every company is different, but you have leadership that has a different mindset, or something that's not on the forefront of strategic awareness. And the understanding and knowledge and expertise between the two are different. So I think for many aspects, BE managers and transformation managers are somewhat isolated. And again, that's a generalization. It's not all the time, but for a large part of them, they're isolated. The other aspect of it is BE is seen to be this thing of it's quite simplistic in nature. There's your target, you spend your money to get your points. And there's a vast disconnect from what I've experienced of the understanding of how much actually needs to be understood and learned through BE. BE is all about practical application. As you're doing the work, you're picking up and realizing, BE codes don't cover this, how does this work, how does that work? That's why you yourself are so busy with our members, because they're reaching out because they have challenges. And we've worked with some of these companies for over 10 years. So it's the application part of it that is a journey. So when people go for training, they're expected to know things that they don't necessarily know. Training is seen as the start and end, and it's really the beginning.
So, you've also touched on, the disconnect between team members and leadership. You obviously think that with that type of statement and comment, you've had experience with people that are barriers and drivers.
Yes.
Something that I've also seen quite, a lot in my experience within the transformation industry, to see that you're going to get individuals that are driving this strategy of transformation, but then you may also have this in the same organization, individuals that are barriers. From your experience, how have you dealt with that, especially when you can see having a discussion with somebody that you can really see that this person's not really interested, but the company wants to achieve the outcome of a level 1, for example. How have you dealt with that? Because it's one of the biggest challenges I think that the transformation industry faces.
It definitely is, and I think quite a bit of it comes down to personality. For example, if you've got the CFO that typically needs to approve the budget on BE, and for most of the times that is the case. So you have a CFO that is strict on money and very conscious of saving every rand. So the idea and the concept is to speak to two things. Is to speak to individuals like the CFO, if that is the barrier, in terms of the journey of where the business is wanting to go and the impact and what we're actually trying to achieve through this journey, as well as showing them the cost, impact, and the potential ROI that comes through from BE. Most companies, and again, generalization, but most companies see it as BE is just a cost and it's an expense out. Many companies are not focusing on what can you do and what you do BE to encourage ROI, to encourage support into your organization as well.
No, exactly that. I mean, there's two things that I picked up from what you just mentioned. One is that we need to look at how is this going to benefit the business in the long run, sustainably. And it goes both ways, benefiting the business as well as beneficiaries, and that's really important to us. But the second point is about changing mindsets, and I think us as the chamber, we need to drive that and continue driving that, and we've been driving it for such a long time. And some individuals, companies might be upset with us for the way that we talk about transformation, for the way that we talk about BAE, but as you mentioned, it's a personal or personality that is going to make the change. And if we don't change that personality, we're not going to have change. And that's one of the biggest challenges that we find, that people make decisions, and they are the ones that could be a driver or barrier to transformation.
Okay, completely agree. And just further point to add there is on the operational governance side as well. Having KPIs linked to certain initiatives. Your policies, your procedures, the operational governance and infrastructure of the business needs to support the individuals across the board. And if things are counteracting or contradicting what you're trying to achieve, you're swimming against a wall. You're not going to go anywhere. Yeah. And that is a big part. And most companies that I've spoken with, it's very much at the scorecard management level as well as the implementation level. We've done a lot of policy updates and operational governance for some of the companies, but there is a huge, I would say from my experience, there's a gaping hole of operational governance being set up to support the individuals. Also at the risk of, if a person who keeps all the knowledge and expertise leaves, there's a significant impact because they leave with the knowledge and expertise. And that's high risk, and that just doesn't make any sense for a business.
You're actually touching on something really important that I've come to know when dealing with our members. There's always individuals that work within the space that retain that knowledge, and once they leave, there's a challenge. And we've experienced that a few times with our members, and we always encourage them to say, please have some sort of alternative measure in place or controls in place for if this person does leave the organization, somebody can pick up, what has been done already and then to move forward with it. So I think it's a very good point in terms of the concept of succession planning. Yeah. I think that's also important to make sure that there's somebody that's going to be there to take over and go forward with whatever was being done in terms of the transformation journey. Yeah. All right, I think also, from a BE Chamber perspective, we've hosted and designed and implemented so many different programs around the BE legislation. Yeah. What would you say is, that members or companies have an interest in most? When it comes to managing a certain initiative? Would it be the ESG front, bursaries? Yes. What would you say is the most popular or most interesting one that companies are really interested in?
Sure, I would say it's a combination of all three of those in particular. Most companies, the scorecard's been around for a long time. The Medicodes came out 7-8 years ago now, roughly. So, they've been around for some time. Everyone has the general gist of calculating your targets, knowing what you need to spend, although sometimes they do overspend and underspend, that's part of the course. But the main focus of companies now really seems to be around implementation. And there is also a very big focus around the human capital work stream in terms of how you can really affect change over a medium to long term period. There seems to be this focus from companies on focusing on a very short term, 12 month, because the BE measuring period is 12 months. And so we need to start having conversations around how we can start looking at changing and affecting change over a longer period, especially when you're focusing on enterprise development, supply development, and unpacking that. But from a bursaries, enterprise and supply development and a YES perspective, the main thing I'll start with the YES program first. The YES program, we've seen phenomenal pros coming out of the programs that we've launched. But the main factor with the YES program still purely is coming down to cost. And if it's a cost effective, and for many companies it's cost effective, for many companies it's not, and for those that it's not cost effective, they don't go for it. So it really is a major cost driving factor. One of the biggest pros we've seen coming out of it is companies now, instead of committing, especially when you're looking at more junior type roles, instead of committing to a full permanent contract, are able to get to know these individuals over a 12-month period, and then at the end of the period employ people who they want to employ based off their assessment, if you will, of those individuals. So that's been a nice feeder in terms of what we're looking for. So when we place YES candidates, it's focused around where you're looking to potentially grow or where you're potentially looking for additional staff.
And new talent, and a diverse talent that's going to come to the organization to add value. So it does also have that impact.
Absolutely. I mean, if we walk through the office and we look at all the YES candidates that have been through the program that we've hosted as an employed here, I think they're across almost every division in an organization, and there's more than one individual, and absolute gold. So, and that's definitely something that needs to be focused on. In terms of bursaries, I have a lot of conversations with companies, and even when we present in the webinars, there still seems to be a concept of, and people might get a little bit shift in the seats when I say this, but bursaries are still often seen as numbers. It's still often seen as how much do we need to spend? We spend the money, we get our points. And we need to be more conscious of who we actually supporting. We need to be more conscious of those people being aware of who the contributing company is. So many bursary candidates don't even know who the company is that's supporting them. And I mean, that's shocking in that sense. So we need to make sure that that's in place. And the last thing we need to do is when we're supporting bursaries, which many companies are underestimating, is we're making assumptions, which is a very big mistake. We're supporting we're supporting individuals with the 30,000 rand tuition fee, and that's what we're happy. However, we are assuming that these individuals have money for transport. We're assuming they have money for food, and these are certain things that people are not necessarily going to declare up front. You know, it's a challenging environment. So we need to be comprehensive in terms of how we support these individuals from a bursary standpoint, and that's very much our drive, is not to assume, and to really help and support these individuals as much as, for example, you and I are privileged to go through and study and go through these things, as much as what I experienced is what every other person out there deserves to experience, and that's really our drive. On an enterprise and supply development perspective, there's a lot we can discuss on it, but I think the main factor around enterprise and supply development is the concept of how we're supporting the beneficiaries, and is it going to have a material impact? We've spoken a lot about how small businesses in South Africa, many of them fail for various reasons. One being, I mentioned in the webinars and the presentations, is mismanagement and lack of cash flow. Giving a company just direct grant of money, we're not fixing the root cause of the problem. So it's how we understand the beneficiary, it's giving the time and attention it deserves. And I think my last point before I hand it back to you, Neil, is when people are implementing enterprise and supply development, and this is not an indictment on people, but most of the time they're wearing many hats in an organization. So they only have a finite amount of time dedicated to what they need to do from an SD perspective. And often of the time it's not enough. So we don't fully understand the beneficiary. Any beneficiary that gets asked, would you be willing to accept a contribution? Hand up in there, yes please, yes please. So we need to help them understand their business, and we need to show that if you're spending R500,000 Rand on enterprise supply development, it's going to the right place for the right reasons to make that business sustainable.
No, definitely, and I think you touched on a few points that Keba even mentioned in his session when we had our session and our discussion in terms of the challenges. And cash flow was one of the biggest challenges for small businesses and how they manage that. And Keba also had some thoughts that he wanted to share in terms of how we can change things and how we can do things differently. So I believe that there's so much potential in this area, especially around ESD. It's all about that willingness. It's all about that willingness to make sure that you are going to implement initiatives that are sustainable and also beneficial to both parties, both business and the beneficiaries, and that's the ultimate goal of why we have such a piece of legislation in play. Speaking of bursaries, I mean, if you look at the time right now, and again, we at the Chamber, we always want to make sure that we provide comprehensive support. And we've taken decisions on this where if instead of trying to, just push out tuition to different students with just tuition with no supporting costs, where those individuals might not have a place to stay or even food or travel, we are setting them up for failure, and we've taken a decision to not do that within our bursary program management. We want to make sure that we can provide enough support for somebody to be successful. Ultimately, we want them to be successful at the end of the day. But speaking of bursaries, now is that time of the year where a lot of companies are investing in bursaries, considering that it's going to be the new academic year that's starting now in 2025. From your experience, where's the interest in terms of timing between bursaries, ESD, yes, is it just all year round, or is there specific times of the year that you see an interest coming up between companies, amongst companies?
Well, I think the companies that I've been engaging with for the last number of years, and obviously I've got a lot of companies that I've had with me for the last number of years, there's definitely been a drive on proactiveness. From a bursary standpoint, as well as an enterprise and supply development aspect. So the general gist of the way that we're flowing now is also because companies are kind of concerned to project too far and overspend or underspend too early in the year. So what we're doing with the majority of companies is doing 80% of enterprise and supply development as early in the year as possible. And then obviously top up towards the end of the year. Bursaries tends to wait a little bit later on towards the end of the year, but it's also understandable because universities open, that's when everyone opens up for the course, and so that is, and you're also wanting to track academic results. What's only come out very late on in the year. So for what we try and do on a bursary standpoint is not just because I've supported you this year, okay, that's you done, I'm not going to be working with you or supporting you in the future. We work with organizations to say, look, we're strategic in terms of who we are targeting in the universities, especially for potentially bringing through to your organization. So we want to have a 1, 2, 3 year journey with these individuals, and we're tracking the academic results to see, making sure that they're hitting the requirements to be renewed or to be supported the following year and so on. But I think that there are many companies out there that are still waiting very late. I've had 1 or 2 meetings in the last month or so where companies contributed on the 29th, 30th of December, and that's just, it's risky. I mean, you're getting your point, sure, but it's risky. There's no ROI, and there's a point where I'm assuming because it's done so late in the year, very little assessment is done. So you have very little control over the money and the impact of supporting the beneficiary, which is not what we're trying to achieve here.
No, definitely not. And what about YES? The YES initiative, I mean, it's an initiative that I want to see growing year on year, and they have been growing year on year. It's one of those initiatives that, yes, you mentioned it earlier, it's all about the costing, because when we look at employment of individuals, it's not only about the salary that they'll be earning on a monthly basis, but it's all of the added costs, the human capital component, the HR costs, the desk, the chair, the laptop, all of these different types of costs come into play when you employ somebody. So with the YES initiative, do you see companies also waiting later into the year, early in the year, or is it just varying? Does it just vary across company to company?
I think the majority of companies are waiting till later on in the year. Based on the conversations we've had with the companies on YES, there's still a big misunderstanding or lack of understanding in terms of how the YES program works, in particular with regards to the timelines. They just don't understand no one's actually taking them through how year 1 versus year 2 and year 3 works, and the overlap, the period before the verification agency audit. So there's a lot there that they're not really grasping. So it's just because we end up meeting with them, discussing it with them, they're like, oh, we realize what we actually have to do. So I would say the YES program is still very much a reactive approach. The other aspect of it is because the first time that you're considering something new, which for companies that haven't done YES before, it's an additional expense. And that's why it's also a focus on the cost, because it's not budgeted for. So we have to go through and show them, look, this is the concept and the process. And this is also the cost-benefit ratio. There is the programs we've done that have worked for companies have been absolute gold. I'm a big fan of the program. I think it's necessary, and we are really creating a lot of change and creating an environment. And like I mentioned earlier, we're proof of that with the people we have here. So it's definitely a journey, and it's a discussion that needs to be had. But I think that the industry as a whole don't necessarily understand the full pros and cons of the YES program. And the financial impact is there, sure, but what is the overall outcome? We had a company come back to us and say that they've actually managed to reduce their recruitment fees because they've been able to use the YES program as now an absorption factor. So there's a lot of offsets, and we're quick to make a decision of it's an extra £500,000, no, we're not spending that. But we're making that decision in isolation of many other factors that are not being considered, which is obviously not ideal.
Yeah, no, of course. I think that, when certain discussions are had within companies, within boardrooms, they look at the numbers first. They don't look at, what's going to be the impact on our organization, how are we going to streamline certain or other areas within our business, how is this going to then help us grow as a business in a different form that doesn't involve numbers. So we're hoping that even with our members and also individuals that are hearing us today and listening to the session today, also understands that it's not only about the numbers, the money, it's also about how your business is going to benefit and grow in the future. And sometimes you can't really put a rand value on that, and that's why it makes it so difficult to actually understand and actually want to do it, because you can't really see that. But it's also just something to consider. I think that once you start considering that, you can then see how best you can grow in the future and how it will change things within your own business. Etienne, from your side, if you had to reflect on the year of 2024, what was one of the biggest lessons that you've learned from our members and for clients, or discussions that you've had?
Sure.
I know it's a very difficult question.
It's a very difficult question.
There were many lessons learned, but what's one of the biggest lessons that you've had?
I think it's part and parcel of what I've mentioned to you now, and I think it's one of the biggest lessons I've learned is for me in my meetings and discussing with clients is not to assume anything, and vice versa for them not to assume anything. I think what we also need to understand is one of the biggest challenges that our clients face, and the BE managers and transformations we talk to, is how we empower them to be able to have the conversation internally. Because often when we step out the room, they're the ones that have to go and motivate through to leadership, and they don't always have the full context, because we live and breathe this every day, all do well. You and your team from a technical aspect, I do it from a business development aspect. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges that they make. I think the last one is the shift and the changes in the organizations, and that comes to what I mentioned earlier, is around the operational governance and how more important that's becoming. Companies that lose their BE transformation managers, they resign or whatever the case may be, one of the significant challenges we picked up this year is the recruitment of in-house BE managers and transformation managers, and how long and how difficult it actually is, and how do you assess them? Everyone's done the course. Many people have done the BE managers course here at the chamber. People have worked in BE for some time, but there is a lot of misinformation, and it's difficult to. How do we assess these people correctly? How do we bring in someone we know is going to have an impact? It is a strategic, critical role, and we don't necessarily have control over that, which is a big concern.
So I think education is really important. I mean, Frick tells me this all the time. We always talk about education as well as communication. Those are the two terms that we use quite frequently, I think, between ourselves. But I think it's about us also as the chamber and also other institutions educating individuals and empowering them with the knowledge to make those informed decisions as organizations. And that's really important, and that's something that us as the BE Chamber will continue to do so through our webinars, through our newsletters, through our podcasts, our magazine, anything that we do within the BE Chamber. We're trying to educate and inform people about certain areas of transformation. Etienne, to wrap up with our session today, very last question for you. Any message that you want to share with our team, for our clients, with our members of 2025? What do you want to see happening in this year? Anything you'd like to share?
I think for 2025, it's a very optimistic year. I think the conversations we're having with clients are definitely they're more a mature type of conversation. When I say mature, it's more informed, it's more challenging the status quo, which is very encouraging. And I think that the initiatives that in conjunction with the government, in conjunction with service providers, I definitely think we're moving in the right type of direction. I think the main thing here is to really challenge, and what I would encourage companies to do is to challenge the fact that fantastic, we're getting the points, but how we're getting the points matters. How we are improving the conditions of South Africa as a whole and the economy matters, and that is ultimately the drive and why we're doing what we're doing. So really a key focus on those types of areas. From our side, I think it's an exciting year. We've had very good growth this year so far, and I think next year we're going to continue down that path, and the products that we're creating on an ongoing basis in conjunction with the feedback we're getting from clients, it's been really helpful, and I think we're creating some amazing initiatives that are really going to support and help companies in the future.
No, awesome. I agree with you with many of the points that you mentioned, so really exciting to wrap up this year, but also looking forward to 2025. So Etienne, thank you for your time today. Really great having this discussion with you, also hearing from you, your thoughts, your challenges that you've also experienced, as well as, just the general knowledge on certain topics has been really insightful listening to you. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you, Neil.
To our viewers, thanks once again for joining us in our session today. We hope you found the session quite valuable. There's some good takeaways in respect of how you are going to be managing your own transformation journey, or just you've learned something different or learned something new just based on the discussion between myself and Etienne. We hope that it's really been valuable. To our team, our members, our clients, we hope that everybody ends up the year on a very good note, on a very high note, and starts 2025 with a real bang. We're looking forward to 2025. We're looking to build off what we've created in 2024 and move from strength to strength in the year of 2025. Do join us in our next session. We'll be recording this in the new year in 2025, and we're looking forward to it. Thank you very much, everyone, and take care and goodbye.